I'm the former chair of this particular conference because I did it for a long time and helping out today. I am the immediate past president of the Philadelphia chapter, and I am currently involved with the website task force, the education committee, and the CAC. So I'm staying busy. It's a long day. Okay, I'll go on mute now.
Thanks. Mark next.
Hi, my name is Mark. Yeah, everyone's echoing. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, I'm also a past president of the PMC chapter, although a few years before Danielle. And just glad we can keep this thing going through the pandemic.
Great. Excellent. Jamie?
Sure. I'm Jamie Sagan. I'm in San Antonio, Texas. I work for HEB, a regional grocery company. I work in the pharmacy department where I'm the communications advisor. So I get to help build training materials for whatever initiatives we have, as well as send out communications from corporate office to our stores. And we've been pretty busy for the past few months with COVID vaccine distribution. And I'm involved with STC at both the chapter, SIG, and at the society level. So I'm happy to work there. And in fact, I actually helped build the CONDUIT program for the past 2 live events. So I was happy to help with that.
Great.
So I'm happy to actually be here.
They were awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much. Tim, why don't you go next? I'm just going in order the way you're showing up on my screen. So.
Oh, sure. I'm Tim Esposito, and I'm going to join the ranks of past presidents of PMC. I'm the current STC secretary on the board. I did a lot of stuff for PMC to be the treasurer, and I did everything basically at some point other than actually organize this conference. And I have a helper here who is very interested in whatever I'm talking about while I'm talking. Yeah.
Good for him. He's got a good name. Same name as my father. So very nice. All right, Steve.
Hi, I'm Steve Jong. I have been an STC member for upwards of 40 years now, and I am currently immediate past president of STC New England. I've been active at the chapter level. I've been active at the society level. I've done a whole lot of things. And I currently work as the site lead and Hitachi Vantara at Waltham, Massachusetts. So I'm still employed.
Excellent. That's great to know. Dave, you go next.
Hi, I'm Dave Pierce. I've been a technical writer for going back to 1980 and also an instructional designer as well at times. But most of my work's been in the area of technical writing. And now I'm in what I call my contract phase. So I'm between contracts right now, but I picked this topic because I think my last contract is applicable to it for a number of different ways. So we'll see what the discussion reveals. Anyway, it's basically all I have for right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anne.
I'm the manager of the Spectrum Conference, which is taking place in a week, and I'm very mindful that we still don't have anybody other than Tim who's presenting, which is marvelous. And of course, Harry, coming from
I'm the only presenter for Spectrum?
Yes, you are. Don't alarm me that way. You know that's not good for my heart. Yes, you have a session on Monday. Are you serious that you forgot?
Said I was the only one presenting at Spectrum.
No, I said you're the only one attending from your chapter, I think.
Okay, good.
And I was asking Danielle.
I thought you said I was the only one presenting. I'm like, wow, I got
No,
it.
you are the only one
man.
presenting.
It's gonna be a
One of these years I will come.
And could figure out somebody who could attend who would be a guest of the Rochester chapter and come.
Let me ask you real quick, if I can, just to usurp this for half a second. since nobody from our immediate council offered that they could do it, because I can't do it, and Jen can't, and we did put it out to a council. Can we put that up for the raffle today? Our spot?
Yes,
you
I
guys
I
do
really
it?
would like to get somebody who was a member of
Okay.
your chapter.
I'll throw
That's
it
the
in
only
there.
restriction. Yes, and
Besides
any
me.
member is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and
somebody
Harry's
else.
attending Leadership Day, I think, at least, so that'll be good, I
Okay.
think.
We'll see if we
Fantastic.
can open it up. Okay.
Oh,
I'll take
please
it back.
do. Yes. I've only been a member for 38 years, so I feel very new to STC when I'm with people who have been members much longer, like Steve and John Garrison. I have my own business. I think it's 42 years old, but when it was turned 7, I said to my mother, what am I going to do with it? She said, send it to school. And I'm reluctant to tell you this. Oh, no, I'm not reluctant to tell you this. It's become a lifelong student. It just can't stop studying. So I'm very proud of it. And I try to do the same. That's why I run Spectrum.
Great. Cool, thanks. And Melissa. You're on mute.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I just had to find the button. I'm a technical writer for a little bit shorter time than Dave, but I'm a freelancer. I've tried working in offices, but I don't fit in. It's a round hole and I'm a square peg, or vice versa. I love instructional design. I have a degree in education, and so I'm kind of a lifelong member of IDL SIG. I've been the co-manager there and was chapter manager at Canada West Coast. I'm a Canadian, and looking forward to this session.
Cool. Great. Thanks. So I do not have much of an agenda for this. I do have a couple broad topics, and I'll sort of list those off, and then I'll talk about the first one, just some of my observations. And this sort of came about just because I was thinking about, I think I had a conflict, not a conflict, I had an interaction with an SME, the subject matter expert, and it occurred to me this is something that we all live with, and we all can obviously try to get better at what we do. And one of the things is working with our peers. So the three broad topics that I was thinking about was sort of, types of subject matter experts that we've had to deal with. And I'll dig into that in just a moment. And then how do we deal with those different types? And then some general strategies and tools for what we do in terms of how we interact. I see most subject matter experts landing somewhere on a scale from, hey, that looks good, thanks for your help. When you submit some work, you do some work, you send it to them, hey, that looks good, thanks. Somewhere in the middle is, yeah, but don't forget this or that. And then at the far end, here's the text, don't edit it. I've worked with all three of those people.
I'll add a fourth one, if I may.
Sure.
Somebody who kind of encompasses somewhere on that same list, but they actually know, quote, they seem to know more about web design and UX and all that than you do, who's a trained professional at it. That's the one I get a lot.
Oh, so you know the I know better than you guy.
Oh,
person.
yeah. And
Okay.
then they take it up a couple notches.
Right. Well, and then I should clarify that here's the text, don't edit it. Those people that I work with, that I do absolutely work with, it's more about that they value subject matter expertise and knowledge far more than writing skill. Right. So on the, they don't view our ability to discern and explain as valuable as the technical actual subject matter knowledge, subject matter information itself. And dealing with that, I could go on forever, but I don't want to, because I don't want to dominate the conversation. I want this to be an open
I was listening because I recently had something where my topic that I actually was trying to offer for the last session is kind of the same topic. So I'm glad that we're still talking about it. I've come across people, like I said, who I have almost I figured out I have this method to try to get those people who are the most difficult on my side most of the time. And I have only one person who has like broken the mold that no matter what I do, they just can't jump on board. And part of it is kind of a compromising strategy where you have to kind of acknowledge, yes, they are the subject matter expert. And then there are some things like, for instance, I mentioned in my last session that I work in HR. So there's some things that just, you have to use their language. You have to use the terminology they use because legally that's the way it goes. But at the same time, I had this one woman who works in compensation, and she was very insistent about how things were laid out. I said, but when people come to your page, what do they come for? Oh, they come for this thing at the bottom. I said, so why is it at the bottom? That should be at the top so they can find it. You know, there's a little bit of the UX part. And part of it was I had to try to show that I wasn't disrespecting what her content was. It was that I have a better idea of how to do, you know, how to present it in the best possible light. And
Right.
I find that to be a huge hurdle with a lot of people. And my whole team is full of a lot of people who have extensive experience. This woman has no real life experience in doing web design and things like this. And she'll just start, you know, we have a directive from somebody higher up in communications that our team is the one who does the layout. We work collaboratively, and that's part of the trick too, you know, make sure they're part of the process, because ultimately their content, the governance belongs to them. But, you know, it's supposed to be a team effort. I mean, in the truest sense of that. And this woman's like, okay, and she'll play along, and then suddenly down, we publish it, and then the next day we see it's been completely rearranged. We're like,
Yeah. Right. So the trick there is to
it's awful.
persuade them and demonstrate to them that you can help them do their job better.
Right.
Right.
I always say it's kind of like a sales pitch in the sense it's when the saleswoman in me starts coming out, and usually I can do it or say, you know, and sometimes I'll compromise. There's something that I don't think should be there, but I'll say, okay, that one I can concede to if you could do this one. And they're like, okay, and I explain why. And they're like, okay, so it's like a dance you almost do. It's like, you know, try not to step on each other's feet.
It's a good, but oddly enough, Danielle, you seem to be in an organization where, you know, having consistent voice, you know, is important, you know, and where the SMEs, you know, can't just, I mean, most of the time can't dictate that it has to be that way. Right. If it's not consistent with the desired voice. And it's been a change for me too, because I work for the Department of Comcast Business now that does customer onboarding and, you know, communication during service changes and that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, we need to get the technical stuff right. But the reason our department exists is to have this consistent voice to the customer.
Exactly.
Right. Thoughtfully
I haven't
crafted.
had a major fight yet, but you know, at the end of the day,
like I said, it's only this one person. Everybody else I can usually get on board. And you know, they're like I said, sometimes there's types you have to concede and sometimes you don't. But most of the time I can kind of get things going in the right direction at least. And that's kind of what you want. But this one particular chick, oh, she drives us crazy. It's like my manager actually had problems where she tried to tell her higher ups what was going on. And they were saying, no, it's just your department. Now I was coming in new and experiences. And for some reason, most of my managers always give me the difficult people. So she's like, okay, you take a shot at this. And I thought everything was going good. I was like, finally, I cracked the code. Boom, no, the woman went back and undid everything and did it wrong, you know, where it's not consistent with all the rest of the pages of the whole website. It was like, we're doing it a certain way for a reason. You don't go through.
Undoing work to make it wrong again sounds infuriating.
Yeah, it is.
Wrong.
It is. It absolutely is.
Anybody else have any other sort of one way to think about these people actually might be personas. You know, we've all heard about those in terms of users, but so any other types that, you know, the subject matter experts that you've worked with that don't fit into any of these sort of categories?
Was one of your categories, maybe it's more closer to the first one that you listed, where it's like, oh yeah, that looks good. There was one like, here it is, you figure it out, and they don't care.
Well, actually, I
That's
did not
another
have that one. I did not have the, here you go.
or you do the work, we'll just go
Right.
along and say, yeah, that's good or not, but they kind of dump everything in your lap and say, you figure it out. And sometimes it's about topics you have no clue about or anything. And you can ask questions, but they're not always they're not non-cooperative, but they're not exactly cooperative either.
Right.
That was another team I had to work with where they just didn't want to do any of the heavy lifting, but then they always had a comment to make about what you did do.
Right.
Along those lines, Danielle, I always have a lot of meetings. They're like, make this look pretty. They'll just throw all the information at you, make it look pretty.
Yeah, they're more impressed with the bling than the actual content. Sorry, you probably can hear the train line behind me, but no good. But I have the whole Northeast corridor about 100 yards behind me. Right. So, but yeah, it's like they're more interested in the bling than the actual meat of the content. Like, what does the content actually say? And is it informative? They just want to, like you said, Jamie, look pretty.
That's actually
somebody wants to categorize what I do as typing it up. You just type it up. Like, no, I actually do a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I like that. But the most insulting thing I think I've heard in my career was somebody who I needed input from to do a document. And I laid out the schedule for him. This is when I have to have it. This is when I send it to review. This is when I send it to production. This is when it's due. And he took the entire time right up to the point where it had to go into production to give me his input, despite my entreaties. And he finally said, I don't understand. I'm doing the work. You're just decorating it.
Oh.
And this is mid-career. This is not my first job.
Wow.
First rodeo. So come to think of it, that's about as insulting, the most insulting thing anyone's ever said to me.
Yeah, I would be insulted too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't encountered that one totally. I mean, a little bit. I mean, getting people to understand that, the fact that it takes a few days to draft something doesn't mean that that's ready to go.
Right.
It is an educational process we seem to have to, I seem to have to do over and over in every job.
Yeah.
I'm afraid so, you're right.
But then again, other people have that problem too.
Oh, yes.
Not just writers.
I think the other problem is governance. Who actually owns the content? So who's going to maintain it once it's all done? Who's going to maintain it and make sure it's all up to date or anything like that? Like, we could be the people to, like Jamie said, make it look pretty and make it look good, and we can get it all up and it's all up to date. But like in 3 or 4 months, it might be completely wrong. Or, having somebody say, in the end, that's their content. I don't own it. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I thought that I can help you maintain it, but ultimately it belongs to maybe a particular group. And getting people to own the content, that governance, or who's responsible for it. That's the one. Who owns this? That's always a big one.
Yeah, we have that same issue too, because we have some SOP documents where accounting has a suggestion, but they don't own the process. We still take their feedback into account, but it's the person who's responsible that signs off on it. So you're trying to gather 2 groups together to come to some sort of agreement. And sometimes that's difficult because they have totally different ideas of how something needs to be accomplished. So sometimes you feel like a referee.
Yeah.
To just gather everyone's ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing more frustrating than a content owner who won't make a decision. I always try to determine, well, who has, if there's a dispute, if you have 2 people who each have opinions about how something should, what's correct or how something should be worded, who makes the final call?
Right.
Because when you don't have that,
the question is that our role in trying to find, again, that compromise between the 2 sides too?
right.
Because you're not going to get everybody.
No, but I mean, when you don't get that compromise, who makes the call?
Right.
And are they willing to make the decision? I mean, I have people who, I think that's one of the tougher team leaders to work with, is the one who just won't make a decision.
Yeah, well, luckily we have very decisive people in our department, so we're good with that. It was just that whole beginning process where they think, oh, this will work better. But the other people are like, no, that's not going to work. But it's just making sure everyone's on the same page, even if they don't agree with each other.
It's
Now, I have
valuable.
a question, and maybe, we can finish this conversation first if people have more to say. But what is different now that you're remote? And are there any techniques that work really well for you being remote?
I mean, even before being remote, I've always insisted everything be, conducted through email. That way I have a written paper trail. So
Yes.
I've maintained that.
Yes.
That there really hasn't been too much change.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too. Because we've had people who would sit in a meeting and say, "Oh, I said such and such." I'm like, put that in writing, or can you give me a request to make sure that we cover that or something like that? Because my pen's not working. I kind of might lie and say,
I'll get the same thing. I'll get a request via Slack. I'm like, hey, we need to change this. I'm like, can you please send an email so that I can file it away, so that, because this direct message on Slack is going to disappear in about a week, and then any record of it's going to be long gone with it. Like I sometimes feel like I'm a guy shouting, "Get off my lawn," but at the same time, I'm not convinced that some of these new tools are all that much better. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I actually think we're using Jira a lot, and that's really good. If you make them write the comment in the Jira task, because first of all, everything related to the job is together as opposed to emails, where things are not grouped by job very well, at least not unless you do a lot of work to make that happen. But in Jira, it is truly permanent. Anything commented in that kind of tool is recorded, and that's it's also really good for recording when you're not getting responses. Like, hey, I sent an email, I reached out this date, no response, I reached out again.
Yeah.
All of that is there.
Yeah.
I had a manager
using other tools.
suggested using Jira, recommended using Jira for exactly that purpose. It is the record. If you disappear, the next writer can pick up the trail if you leave a trail in Jira. Yeah, recording conversations is good. You can copy and paste from Slack or email or whatever.
It also has a really nice My Tasks list, which has everything assigned to me is on the My Task lists. And I can, go into each one. It's
some of that may be configurable by
so much better than spreadsheets. Let me just put it that way.
Yeah. We have used it more at this manager's recommendation, and I've gotten some interesting pushback from engineering managers who said, why are there all these doc tasks polluting our list? We're trying to get projects done.
Right. Yeah. If you put a child task and you don't complete it, then they can't press close on theirs, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. But no, why are there so many tickets that say doc? And the recommended response is, Jira is a tool for use by the company. It is for all of us to use. It is not just for you. We choose to use it too. And I like that. And I have said it.
Well, that's a question too. What happens? Like, how do each of you approach things when you do get pushback? Like, again, we know what we know, and there's a point where you could either get a little bit of pushback and push back yourself, and then there's times where you just get a big heave, and you're like, what do I do now? What are approaches that you take to maybe resolve that, or do you just say, okay, I got to back off?
It's interesting for me. It depends entirely on who it is, because there is a group within our development organization that I have decided and learned to just stop fighting with, because it felt good to stop banging my head against the wall.
Yeah.
And part of that is a political thing. So this was traditionally in some of the products I work on, the software architects wrote the documentation for it, and they always did it at the very end of the cycle, all that, and they wrote it. My predecessor came in seasoned, experienced technical writer, evaluated their stuff and put together like a 200-slide deck explaining to management why what they wrote was so bad. That did not sit well.
Yeah.
She left
sure.
and I moved into that role and I worked for her. So I was aligned with her and I agreed with her too. I didn't agree with her tactics, but I agreed with her that it was badly written.
Her assessment, yeah.
But so I was somewhat tainted by this. And so there is this subset of people. I don't think what they do I don't think they're especially good writers, but I just don't fight it.
Yeah.
Because
there's
there's no upside for me there,
Yeah.
But when I can push back, I do, and a lot of times it's explaining, sharing perspective. I think it is, like sometimes their subject matter experts are so deep technical and they've worked so hard on things, they want to talk about every little aspect of it. But some of those aspects are so deep that all it's going to do is confuse the audience, and it's not that important that the audience of this document knows that
Right.
that the script that's running underneath the code is called this. No one cares. I know you do,
Mhm.
but the reader of this probably doesn't. And so sometimes it's just a matter of conveying the proper, or trying to portray the proper perspective. Like, in this point, we don't need to say this type of stuff, but we do need more of that type of stuff. And again, it depends on who it is, your
Yeah.
relationships with everybody and the politics involved, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's a big part, what you said with the politics. The woman who I mentioned before, I think we finally, like I said, it started well before I ever came on board. And I think we just have come to the point, it's like, we've done everything. She's the person who waits till last minute. And then once we do it all for her in a rush, she'll say, oh, it took 2 weeks. No, it took us 2 days. Don't lie. We've just decided, let her dig her own grave. We have the documentation to show that we did everything on the up and up. And if she's going to mess everything up, let it fall on her, because we've tried, it's not
Right.
like we haven't. And I think the politics of things is a huge, huge factor, like you
Right.
said.
And as long as
It's a slippery slope.
as long as the appropriate other people know that those politics exist. And so if you
Yeah.
say, I was working with Sally, I know it's not named Sally, but I'm just trying to use the name, right? I'm working with them, and for them to nod and say, okay, I get it. And they quickly know that they don't need to ask anymore, because,
Yeah.
there are certain circumstances where you just throw up your hands and be like, what am I going to do here?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So since this
unfortunate.
topic is called the care and feeding of SMEs, what do you think is the proper care and feeding? Anyone? I mean, this is an open-ended question.
I think, a lot of it is acknowledging their strengths, even if you have to dig really deep to find it. I mean,
Yeah.
Or
just acknowledging their contribution is critical. Thank you. Thank you for providing this. Da 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 da. And sometimes physical bribes never hurt too. I remember back in the office, I would actually bake cookies for some people. Well, at least the people on our learning team, because a lot of times they would do a lot of last minute stuff for me. So little bribe never hurts.
I know the chocolate thing has been said by people other than myself, that, well, we don't have that virtually.
I know.
Yeah.
Although what I'm noticing, does anybody notice with virtual meetings, when you started off with a little chit chat, which is not the American way of doing business meetings typically, but it seems like that couple minutes of chit chat and the meeting goes much more productively, because I think people are missing that contact.
Yes, I think you're right.
The mood. Like, you wouldn't do it necessarily in the conference room, but
I think you would. That's the interesting thing. I think there's, walking to the conference room, you run into another person and you chat on your way in. You may stay a couple minutes on the way out.
Right.
And
I was gonna say, you do it. You just might not have been conscious that you were doing it before.
Right. And you're not so deliberate about it. But in this environment, like I say, people are so focused on the meeting starts at 10 o'clock and it ends at 10:30. And, I have to jump on another one at the top of the hour, whatever the catchphrase is for that particular circumstance. But I agree with you. I always try to have chit chat about some sort of personal connection with people in meetings. And you know, the one of the advantages of, if you will, of this pandemic is we all have something to talk about. It's a subject that we can all talk about our experience with it. How you doing living at home? Have you got vaccinated yet? I mean, you know, whatever it might be.
How far out, you know, when is your shot? How far out are you from your shot or whatever?
Right. And unless you are on very different philosophies about getting vaccinated, in which case you drop the subject quickly, right? No sense in getting into a debate about that. But I think your point, Mark, is well taken, though.
Yeah. Do any of the people who haven't said anything have something they'd like to add?
Well, maybe that would be me. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Dave.
So, one of the things I like to add is I find a difference of being able to effectively gather information when you're getting your information from people who are part of your team. In other words, maybe you both have to report to the same project manager, whereas there are circumstances which you're reaching outside of your own group for information. And in those situations, I find that people can be a little bit less cooperative because they're not on the same time schedule that you're on, you know, for one. And that was basically my experience in my most recent contract, because what I was doing was putting together a knowledge base based on problems that support had encountered in supporting the product. And essentially the concept was to be able to identify all the shortcomings of the product and create a knowledge base based on that. Well, it meant reaching out to people literally all over the company. And I discovered two things. One, first of all, their feeling was, I don't have time for this. Figure out another way to get your information. And in cases where they were providing information, I found that they like to basically apply a filter. You know, it's like, oh, well, you don't need all this information. I'm just going to give you this. And then you find yourself having to go hunting elsewhere for that information, only to come back during a review process to find out that, oh, they actually already knew that. They just never bothered to tell you, you know, and you had to go through this much longer process to get the same information that they could have conveyed you very easily. So, you know,
they could have just left it up to you if you needed the information or not, because if you went into it, you could have taken it out just as easily as they could have. But
let me apply the filter. Don't you apply the filter?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I think you break an interesting point about, you know, when you reach outside your org, what is their incentive to help you, right? Because their incentive isn't at least management pressure in the same sense. But, you know, I think this even ties back to one of the things from the keynote, right? Which is one of my strategies is when people outside my org ask for help, I help them, because I never know if I'm going to have to need their help, right? And so,
exactly,
you know, sort of not pay it forward, but, you know, lead with generosity almost, and be helpful, and be gracious, and don't be shy to say thank you publicly. I copy everybody when I thank the people on my team and the people who helped, just to let everybody know that I know that they helped, and I've been fortunate that way. But it is a challenge when you go outside. You know, if you go outside your org, the priorities are different, and they're like, well, why am I helping this guy? Like, this isn't on my list, you know.
Hopefully you have a common goal of making things better for your customers or your audience, and that you can lead with that. Right. You have to negotiate time with them. You know, there's the win-win.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Although there are still organizations, evidently. I mean, I haven't been in one of those but a couple of you guys seem to be, where the engineers think that what they know is what the customers have to know. And that's just
Right.
usually the whole point of their engineering is to give the customer a product so the customer doesn't have to know all that stuff and can do the customer's job.
But they do not need to know about all the gears inside the product. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But they're proud of making them.
So
Oh, sure,
Yes, they
on the-
are.
sure.
And they should be.
Or
And that's where
Yeah.
our role is. We know our audience. We know those customers aren't going to care how the clock works. They just need to know what time it is.
So
exactly.
on the positive side of that, I find that the agile environment where you're having a daily scrum meeting and all the team members are participating, it gives you a lot of power to, say, to reach out to someone, say, okay, I need this information from you, in X amount of time, or today even, if it comes down to that. But you have the full right to reach out to whoever you need to in that environment. And I think that's definitely one of the most powerful aspects of the agile environment for technical writers.
I think it's in Agile, the word is that documentation is supposed to be as minimal as possible.
Well,
Right.
but I think that's a misnomer, I think, to a point. I think that means internal documentation and development
Yeah,
correct.
documentation.
Yeah.
It does not necessarily mean end user doc is less. And unfortunately,
Well, sometimes it does work that way.
sometimes unfortunately, that belief that you shared is pervasive. And, from the end user's perspective, again, they don't care how the clock works. They want to know what time it is. They don't care how you built it and that you did it 2 weeks at a time. They just want to know that they can enter their time card information properly, or
Yeah,
whatever business stuff they're doing.
exactly. And I think people who don't understand how content works don't understand that audience perspective. I think that's usually the biggest hurdle, to get it through to SMEs is that they're not the audience. Your actual users or people using your product are the audience for the documentation. And that was something that I remember having to deal with people who probably helped with this whole vaccine thing. They were scientists who had to do with the screening of different compounds and things like that. And every single research lab had to go through this particular thing. And they're like, we have no clue how to put together a website that will get the information we need. We have it all just kind of thrown in there, but we have no clue. And it took us a while just to sift through. And since these were people who were, PhDs in, microbiology and chemistry, and you're like, okay, but why would the content go there? Okay, so this is where, again, that balance of sometimes you have to leverage, yes, I do know what I'm doing, and trying to convince them and show them through, this is the thought process.
And get to the heart, like, what is it we're trying to tell them, and what's the best way to do that? And we don't have to tell them everything honest, they don't care about everything they want to know. They want to know where they can go to get their vaccine.
Yeah.
I have some journalism training, and that's proven very helpful over the years. It's a journalistic exercise. Do your research, ask good questions, don't waste their time.
I usually ask them I usually kind of go with the idea of ask adverb questions. If you could answer the who, what, where, when, why, how, to what extent stuff. If you cover most of that, you're golden. You don't need anything more, anything less than that.
Yep.
So we have 30 seconds. Any last thoughts about this topic? I don't know if we talked about care and feeding, but we did talk about dealing with our subject matter experts in our
maybe it was the care and
That's
feeding of us dealing.
That's what care and feeding is in this case.
Right. Well, and that's sometimes what we need. Again, this is a good opportunity. This is like a thing that will happen in the common room at a conference between sessions or whatever. Like, I'm dealing with this engineer who's going to make me crazy. Anyway,
And when
thanks
all
so much
else
for joining.
fails,
Yep.
We're going to
banana
go
bread.
up in a second.